Being a high school grad is a disgrace to the family. Get out, haha. At my sister's wedding, her mill suddenly tried to kick me out. I was shocked by her words and froze. My sister is a doctor working at the hospital where her mill works. But my sister's marriage and my education have nothing to do with each other. I was about to stand up and loudly object. But then, someone stepped forward in front of the mill. The bride herself, my sister. Wait a minute, you mean to tell me, Mill, that you don't know what my brother does for a living? Huh. She probably didn't expect my sister to fight back. Caught off guard, the father-in-law, who is the hospital director, hurried over. With a face red from anger and embarrassment, he was sweating as he scolded the Mill and others. What are you talking about? Don't you know? The truth is, he is. My name is Kevin Brown. I'm a 34-year-old freelancer. Work keeps me busy, and I sometimes travel abroad for jobs, not just within Japan. My parents passed away 4 years ago, but I have an older sister, Emily, who is a doctor. She's the only family I have. I got a call from her just recently. Emily, it's been a while, but what's up? Is something wrong? Well, I'm getting married. Wow, that's awesome, congratulations. I thought she might never marry since she was single until 35. It's a happy story for my sister, which makes me happy too. I was thinking of waiting until you got a girlfriend, Kevin, but I couldn't keep him waiting any longer. What are you talking about? If you waited for me to find someone, you might never get married. My sister laughed out loud and then added in a kind voice. Don't say that, just find someone nice and let me know. I'll find someone eventually. I later learned from my sister that her fiancé, Tyler White, is the heir to the hospital where she works, and he's a doctor too. My sister, a pediatrician at the same hospital, met him as a colleague, and they've been dating for a long time. Speaking of which, Tyler's sister was in your grade in high school. She said you two were in the same class, remember her? Well, what a coincidence. I wonder if we were in the same class. Surprised by the unexpected connection, I asked again, and my sister revealed an unbelievable fact. She said so. Do you remember her? Her name is Nancy. Nancy, as in Nancy White. Seeing my surprise, my sister asked curiously. Is something wrong? No, nothing. I'm looking forward to meeting Nancy too. After hanging up, bitter memories from high school flooded back into my mind. There was a reason her name took me aback. Back in high school, I went through a period of suffering from numbness in my limbs. It would improve after a while, but if I exercised or played an instrument during music class, I couldn't stand it at all. I became unable to attend school and started missing a lot of classes. Most of my friends were concerned about me, but there were exceptions. The worst was Nancy, who was in my class. Nancy was a central figure in the class, always wanting things her way. She got angry that my absence broke the class's perfect attendance record, and complained bitterly. After that, no matter how much I explained my genuine ill health, she dismissed it as me skiving off and wouldn't listen. Over time, my symptoms got worse, and I could hardly go to school anymore. Even on days when I felt better and went to school, Nancy would quickly spot me and say things like, "Oh, you decided not to skip today. You must be always playing games at home. You won't get into any college like that," constantly bad-mouthing me. I didn't hate high school, but the thought of seeing Nancy was always daunting. The idea of having such a disliked person become a relative was disheartening just to think about. But Nancy is also now in her mid-30s, a grown adult. I decided to hope that her attitude has changed by now. Afterward, my illness worsened, and I ended up taking a leave of absence from school. The numbness in my limbs became frequent. And eventually, I started experiencing paralysis, so I went to the hospital for an examination. I was diagnosed with a disease called moyamoya disease. Moyamoya disease is a condition where the blood vessels in the brain narrow, leading to a shortage of blood supply to the brain. It's said to be more common in Japanese people, but its cause is unknown, and it's designated as a rare disease by the country. It can occur in teenagers and can progress if left untreated, so surgery is often recommended. However, the surgery required is major, involving connecting extracranial and intracranial vessels, and of course, there are risks of complications. As a high schooler, I was faced with the decision to either manage it with medication to control my blood pressure or undergo surgery. Initially, I intended to opt for surgery, but the more I learned about it, the more I lost the courage to proceed. Since there's no definitive cure for Moyamoya disease, using medication to lower blood pressure to prevent onsets still carries the risk of stroke and increases the risk of bleeding due to the burden on the compensatory Moyamoya vessels. Thus, surgery is generally the course of action. But there's a risk of reduced blood flow to the brain during anesthesia, leading to stroke, especially since it takes about 1 to 3 months after surgery for sufficient blood flow to be restored to the operated part of the brain. And careful monitoring is required during this time. Hearing this, I was embarrassed to admit, but I became terrified of the surgery. That's when my sister found Dr. Smith, known as a genius in neurosurgery. Meeting him significantly changed my life. After he passionately explained everything and shared several success stories, I finally made up my mind. Above all, believing I could entrust my care to Dr. Smith with confidence, I went ahead with the surgery. As a result, the surgery was a resounding success, and at 18, I finally returned to my original healthy state. Dr. Smith, thank you so much, I said, bowing my head. Dr. Smith smiled kindly. Because of this disease, you couldn't do what you wanted for the past few years. From now on, take on challenges and fulfill your dreams. It's because of Dr. Smith's words that I am who I am today. A few days after receiving the call from my sister about her getting married, she contacted me again. There was going to be a meeting with her fiancé's family before the wedding, and she wanted me to attend. I was happy about my sister's marriage, but the thought of seeing Nancy again didn't excite me much. However, for my sister's sake, I decided to go ahead and attend. After all, for us without parents, I am the only family my sister has. On the day of the meeting, I headed to a well-known hotel in Tokyo. Today's attendees from the groom's side are the mother-in-law, Tyler, and his sister Nancy, making 3 people. The father-in-law, who is the hospital director, couldn't attend due to sudden business. From the bride's side, it's just my sister and me. Arriving at the hotel earlier, my sister and I waited nervously for the other party to arrive. Have you met his mother and sister before? Yes, his mother is an active doctor working at the same hospital, so she's also my colleague, working hard. My sister answered with a calm smile. I've heard that Nancy, the sister-in-law, has been doing various part-time jobs. I'm meeting Nancy for the first time, so I'm looking forward to it. While we were talking about this, Tyler, the prospective groom, entered the room. Sorry to have kept you waiting. We've just arrived ourselves, so it's fine. Tyler, who will be the groom, is a man with a good posture and a sharp look, perfectly suited for my gentle sister, which reassures me. Nice to meet you. I'm Kevin, the brother. I've been looking forward to meeting you. I've always heard about you from Emily as her proud brother. I'm glad to meet you. We quickly found common ground in our shared interest in cycling, and the conversation took off from there. Just as I was feeling relieved that we might get along well, the door opened again, and the mother-in-law and sister-in-law Nancy entered. Being an active doctor, the mother-in-law had a brisk demeanor. So, you're Kevin. Nice to meet you. I've heard you and Nancy were classmates. I figured anything Nancy might have said about me probably wasn't too flattering, so I let it slide. Kevin, it's been a while. How are you feeling today? It's been a while. I'm all better now. Surprisingly, Nancy didn't make any of the snide remarks she used to in high school. Perhaps it was because she'd grown up. But she spoke to me in a cheerful manner, which made me feel relieved that things would be okay. As expected of a famous hotel, the food was delicious, and we enjoyed some wine, making for lively conversation. My sister and Tyler seemed to have been together for a long time, making them a well-matched and serene couple. After the meal, my sister suggested we go see the beautiful hotel garden, so we got up from our seats. But as soon as my sister and Tyler were out of sight, Nancy's attitude changed dramatically. "So, Kevin, still lazing around at home as usual?" No, I'm working," I answered, surprised by this sudden prickly question. But Nancy seemed unsatisfied, sizing me up with a scrutinizing look. "Really now, I heard you were absent so much in high school that you had to take a leave of absence. And they let you graduate out of pity. And yet, you didn't even go to college afterward, did you? It seems that people's personalities don't change much just with age." The cheerful mood I had been in vanished completely. But it seemed best to clear up the misunderstanding. "I didn't go to college right away because I was ill. Now I'm healthy and working." "But your job is probably like playing around, right? You always had a habit of skipping and playing since high school." I was at a loss with Nancy's relentless sarcasm and hoped the mother-in-law would come to my aid. However, the mother-in-law, with a cold gaze, added insult to injury. "Our family has a tradition of everyone graduating from college. We warmly welcome Emily, who diligently studied and became a doctor, but you, well." After saying so, the mother-in-law snorted at me as if to belittle me. "So, you're saying I'm not suitable to be part of your family?" "Yes, that's right. Because not going to college means you're just a high school graduate, right? Being related to someone like that is embarrassing, isn't it?" The mother-in-law nodded dismissively, looking at me with even more disdain. "Furthermore, I don't want to associate with a playboy with a habit of skipping responsibilities, as Nancy describes. I've never slacked off." I tried to correct her. But the mother-in-law showed no sign of listening, and Nancy looked at me with a smirk, clearly enjoying my discomfort. "People who skip always say that. Your sister has become a respectable doctor. And just hearing that you're a high school graduate tells me all I need to know about you." "Isn't that a bit harsh to say?" I protested, but the mother-in-law still wouldn't budge from her stance. In fact, she went on to say something even worse. "That's why, naturally, you'll be excluded from the wedding, right? We can't add a high school graduate to our family lineage." Apparently, the mother-in-law judges people based on their educational background. Everyone has their circumstances, and after all, a person's worth shouldn't be determined solely by their education. But it seemed that such reasoning didn't apply to the mother-in-law, who unapologetically labeled me as a failure without question. Excuse me for saying this. But the moment I tried to argue back, Emily and Tyler returned to their seats, so I shut my mouth. I didn't want to start a fight on Emily's big day. "Hey Kevin, what's wrong? You look pretty pale." "Really, I hope we didn't push you too hard meeting us, sorry." The concern from these two was so kind, I really didn't want to worry them further. I switched gears and answered with a smile. "No, it's just that the meal was so good, I ended up drinking too much wine. Today has really been enjoyable." My mother-in-law and Nancy were just silently smiling the whole time. It seems like in front of Emily and Tyler, they want to hide their true selves. But when they looked at me, the coldness was still there in their eyes. Thus, the meet and greet somehow came to an end, but even after returning home, I remained in low spirits. The thought of having to associate with my disdainful mother-in-law and Nancy as family members from now on weighed heavily on me. Despite finally getting better from my illness and achieving my dream, I felt like I had been burdened with new baggage. Yet, I was supportive of my sister's happiness. After all, wasn't it great that Tyler, who would become my brother-in-law, was a good person? My father-in-law didn't come to the meet and greet, but I've met him through work before and know him to be a gentle and kind person. Tyler must take after his father. Thinking this way, the marriage didn't seem all bad. Somehow managing to shift my mood, I shook off the bad premonitions from my mind. Time flew by, and before we knew it, the day of my sister's wedding arrived. Despite what my mother-in-law said, of course, I attended. It was my beloved sister's big day. So I decided not to care about whatever my mother-in-law or Nancy would say, and slipped into my suit. The wedding was held at a grand hotel, chosen by Emily and Tyler after much deliberation. It wasn't just the lavish appearance, but also the thoughtful attention to the guests that made it a wonderful ceremony. Many colleagues from the hospital attended, which was a joy for me as her brother, enveloped in a grand celebratory mood. Tyler looked distinguished in his tuxedo. And Emily, even though she is my sister, was breathtakingly beautiful in her wedding dress. Emily usually dresses so modestly, but today she shone brilliantly. Seeing my sister so happy made me feel even happier than I could imagine for myself. The wedding ceremony concluded smoothly, and we moved on to the reception. At first, the atmosphere felt stiff. Probably because many hospital colleagues were there, but it soon warmed up with the start of the entertainment. Emily and Tyler, sitting at the newlyweds table, were all smiles watching everyone's enjoyment. Amidst this, loud laughter from my mother-in-law and Nancy at the groom's family table could be heard. It seemed they weren't used to the alcohol and got quite drunk, their faces red and noticeably in high spirits. Seeing the groom's mother drunk at a reception was something I hadn't seen often. Although she had made snide remarks to me, I began to worry about her. Then, a few minutes later, my fears were confirmed. The mother-in-law staggered up to the reception's host, grabbed the microphone, and started speaking out of the blue. Nancy, her face flushed red from the alcohol, followed her, stumbling over, standing next to her, and smirking. "Thank you all for gathering here today for Tyler. We're so pleased to be blessed by so many of you with such education and status." Her speech was surprisingly coherent despite her drunkenness. But then, she said something completely unexpected, and I was taken aback. However, there is someone among us who does not match the caliber of everyone here. The bride's brother, Kevin. He was a slacker who frequently skipped high school classes. And believe it or not, he didn't even go to college. The room buzzed, and all eyes suddenly turned to me. Embarrassed beyond belief, my face turned so red it felt like it could burst into flames. Surveying the murmuring crowd, my mother-in-law exhaled deeply with a look of satisfaction. Then, pointing at me, she declared loudly while laughing, "A high school graduate is a disgrace to the family. Get out." At my sister's wedding, to be suddenly told to leave by my mother-in-law, I was mortified and didn't know where to put myself. To try and distance me over my education is beyond rude. Moreover, that information is incorrect. I thought about standing up and shouting back in defense. But I didn't want to ruin my sister's big day. To avoid causing any more disturbance, it seemed I had no choice but to leave. As I reluctantly stood to go, someone stepped forward in front of my mother-in-law. It was the bride, the star of today, my sister. "Wait a moment. Could it be, mother-in-law, that you're unaware of my brother's profession?" "Nay." It seems she hadn't anticipated my sister standing up for me. Beside the dumbfounded mother-in-law, now it was Nancy who raised her voice. "That's obvious without asking. He must be unemployed or a part-time worker, right, given his history of skipping school. And on top of being just a high school grad, it's unthinkable he'd have anything but a bottom-rung job." Watching Nancy laugh mockingly, my sister's face fell. Then, another person hurriedly approached where my mother-in-law and Nancy were standing. It was the father-in-law, who runs the hospital. Angry and embarrassed, his face turned red as he broke into a sweat trying to stop my mother-in-law and Nancy. What are you two saying? Do you even understand what you've just done? Don't be so dramatic. You must be embarrassed too, having someone who only graduated high school join our family. My mother-in-law laughed it off, mocking me together with Nancy. To that response, my father-in-law explained desperately, his face even redder. No, Kevin is a freelance neurosurgeon. He's a renowned expert in neurosurgery, sought after by hospitals around the world. Nah. My mother-in-law was so surprised she just stared at my father-in-law with her mouth agape. Our hospital, too, is having him perform a complicated surgery soon, thanks to an introduction by Emily. We're already booked solid for days. What do you think will happen to the patients if he refuses now because of this? But Nancy said he was just a high school grad. My mother-in-law stuttered, her lips trembling, while Nancy turned pale, casting incredulous glances my way. But there was no doubt about the truth of my father-in-law's words. In fact, due to illness, I hadn't been able to go straight from high school to college. Thanks to Dr. Smith's surgery, I regained my health without any lingering effects, which allowed me to reclaim my life. Afterwards, I wanted to help people suffering from illnesses, just like I had, so I aspired to become a doctor. Despite being a few years behind my peers, my relentless effort eventually paid off when I was admitted to a prestigious university's medical school after intense study. I worked hard, passed the National Medical Licensing Examination, and obtained my much-desired medical license. Under Dr. Smith's mentorship, I honed my skills and am now recognized as a leading neurosurgeon. At the hospital where my sister works, which is also run by my father-in-law, I've been eagerly asked to handle several challenging surgeries. As my mother-in-law and Nancy fell utterly silent, my father-in-law rushed over to my seat in a panic. Dr. Kevin, I am truly sorry for the disrespectful things my wife and daughter have said. Please forgive us. My father-in-law was apologizing on his knees, while my mother-in-law and Nancy stood behind him, utterly dumbfounded. Noticing them, my father-in-law raised his voice and beckoned them over. What are you doing just standing there? Apologize to him, now. Scolded harshly by my father-in-law, the two of them slowly approached me. They finally bowed their heads, but their expressions were still filled with resentment as they bit their lips and glared at me. Please raise your head, Director. Can you really forgive us? My father-in-law's face lit up as he looked at me hopefully. But the situation wasn't so simple. No, may I have some time to think about it? We work in the same hospital, and the thought of encountering this person makes it difficult for me to suppress my feelings. As a doctor, I wanted to keep my professional and personal life separate. However, seeing my mother-in-law and Nancy, the unpleasant memories they've caused me are likely to resurface. Neurosurgery requires intense concentration, and even a slight tremble in the fingers can lead to dire consequences. Even the slightest distraction could jeopardize the lives of our patients, which are of utmost importance. I feel terrible for my father-in-law, who has done nothing wrong, but I simply cannot proceed with the surgery under these circumstances. I conveyed this, but unexpectedly, my father-in-law's face brightened. If that's the case, there's no problem. I'm planning to divorce my wife soon anyway. What are you talking about? My mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock, and she turned pale as she questioned my father-in-law. It seems the alcohol had completely worn off by then. This is too sudden. I haven't heard anything about this. Why would you say you're divorcing me? Do you think I don't know anything? In contrast to the distraught mother-in-law, the father-in-law remained utterly calm as he gently pushed her back. While I was busy managing the hospital, and often absent, it seems you've been doing as you please. What are you talking about? I was only supporting you as the wife of the director. Despite her desperate retort, the father-in-law calmly began to reveal shocking facts. Using that title you hold so dear, the director's wife, haven't you been wielding power for years, acting tyrannically? Impossible. My mother-in-law seemed to lose all her previous momentum, opening and closing her mouth as if searching for words. But my father-in-law continued his relentless attack. According to him, my mother-in-law targeted employees she disliked, assigning them an unreasonable amount of work. This caused the targeted staff to become mentally ill or forced to resign, leading to a significant staff shortage. I admit I may have been too strict in my guidance. I'll apologize for that, but to divorce over this. I'm also aware of your actions outside the hospital. You should recognize this, he continued, holding something up. Saying this, my father-in-law produced a photo of my mother-in-law walking with a young man. It turns out my mother-in-law was a regular at host clubs, extravagantly spending on young hosts, even going as far as to buy apartments for them as lovers. I've had enough of you doing whatever you want, thinking I wouldn't know. Wait, it's not like that. I didn't know about such play, but it was Nancy who invited me. Caught in an unexpected betrayal, Nancy widened her eyes and raised her voice. Wait, Mom, are you abandoning me? Well, it was the host club you introduced me to. Watching the two start to quarrel loudly, my father-in-law declared calmly. I've had enough of you two, Nancy. Why me? I haven't been to any host clubs. You've never worked, just mooched off your mother and idled around. I've warned you for years, but I've reached my limit. I'm cutting ties with both of you. Upon hearing this declaration, my mother-in-law and Nancy collapsed to the floor, beginning to cry. The people in the venue held their breath, listening to the family drama unfold, but it was clear who was at fault. Murmurs of to think the mother and daughter were troubling the director like this. And I wish that family would just leave, could be heard around the room. What's the deal? Why is everyone looking at us like that? I'm not to blame. I'm not okay. Trying desperately to be forgiven, the mother-in-law and Nancy pleaded with the stepfather in tears. However, feeling awkward under the cold stares from those around them, they twisted their faces and stumbled out of the wedding reception. Once their cries were no longer heard, a sigh of relief swept through the room. Kevin, I'm sorry for not realizing you were being treated that way until now. I'm really sorry. My mom and Nancy said some terrible things, making you feel uncomfortable. My sister and Tyler looked at me with concern, their faces clouded with worry, as they comforted me. It seems like my sister, her husband, and I will continue to have a good relationship moving forward. I'm the one who should apologize, causing trouble at your wedding like that. I just want you two to be happy, I said with a smile. When I did, both my sister and Tyler smiled back warmly. I heard that the stepfather and stepmother got divorced within a month after that. The stepfather had been preparing for the divorce for quite some time, and he quickly kicked the mother-in-law out of the house after removing her from the hospital. The mother-in-law was claiming her share of the assets, but the father-in-law countered by suing her for compensation for her affair, and demanded the return of the money she had spent on her lover, effectively forcing her to give up completely. Nancy, unemployed and having lost her home, persistently showed up at her parents' home and the hospital, trying to get living expenses from her father. Eventually, she attempted to break into her parents' home at night, leading to a police report. Furious, her father disowned her, and she was even banned from coming near her family home thereafter. The mother-in-law tried to get a job at another hospital, but rumors of her causing staff to quit circulated, and she couldn't find work anywhere. Now, she seems to be working part-time, living with her daughter in an old, run-down apartment, scraping by day. As for me, I've continued my work as a doctor. Currently, I'm working at my father-in-law's hospital, striving every day alongside my sister to help those suffering from illness. Recently, I've hit it off with a colleague of my sister's, and we've become close enough to go out for meals together. Basking in this happy feeling, today I'm again working at the hospital for our patients.